For as long as I can remember, we always made a big deal out of birthdays. It was our thing. Planning surprises, staying up until midnight to eat cake, sharing little inside jokes wrapped in crumpled gift wrap. No matter how busy life got, we never missed those moments. That's why it caught me completely off guard when my wife, Lily, told me she wouldn't be spending her birthday with me this year. "Some of my colleagues are throwing a dinner," she said casually one evening while scrolling through her phone. "It's been a stressful quarter, so I figured it might be nice to unwind with them." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "Wait, you'd rather spend your birthday with your colleagues than with me?" She didn't look up from her phone. "It's not like that. You can join us if you want." Join them? At some trendy downtown restaurant surrounded by her work friends who barely knew I existed? No thanks. This was supposed to be our day. "Can't we do something together?" I asked, trying to sound reasonable. "We always celebrate together," she sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "We'll have the whole weekend. It's just one night. Okay?" Something about her tone felt off. Dismissive, almost like she couldn't be bothered. I tried to shake it off, but the unease lingered like a dark cloud over the following days. The night of her birthday arrived, and for the first time in years, I found myself sitting alone on what had always been a special occasion. I tried to distract myself, watched some TV, scrolled aimlessly on my phone, but nothing could drown out the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Around 9 p.m., I sent her a text, "How's the dinner?" No response. By 10 p.m., my concern had morphed into something darker. I sent another text, "Everything okay?" Again, no response. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. That's when the unease turned into full-blown panic. I knew the restaurant where she was supposed to be, so I grabbed my keys and drove downtown. My heart pounded the entire way, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she'd had too much to drink and was catching a cab home. Or maybe something else was happening. When I arrived at the restaurant, I scanned the crowd through the window, searching for a familiar face. But Lily wasn't there. I stepped inside, my eyes darting from table to table. The hostess gave me a curious look. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for a group of people celebrating a birthday, Lily's birthday." "Did they already leave?" The hostess frowned. "I've been here all evening, and I don't remember any group like that." "Are you sure it was this restaurant?" My stomach dropped. She might have changed the location." The hostess shrugged. "Sorry, I can't help with that." I left the restaurant in a daze, my mind spiraling. If she wasn't here, where was she? And why hadn't she told me? I called her phone again. Voicemail. I drove around for a while, hoping I'd spot her car parked somewhere. It was a ridiculous idea. What were the chances I'd actually find her like that? But I couldn't just go home and sit in the dark, waiting for an answer that might never come. By midnight, I had run out of places to check. I went home, feeling like a ghost, and sat on the couch in the silence of our living room. The birthday card I had written for her sat on the coffee table, unopened. That's when the front door opened. Lily walked in, her coat draped over her arm, her makeup slightly smudged. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing up?" I stood slowly, my heart racing. "Where were you?" Her smile faltered. "I told you I was at dinner." "No, you weren't," I said, my voice trembling. "I went to the restaurant. You weren't there." Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face for a split second before she masked it with a calm facade. "Oh, we changed plans last minute. Went to a different place. I didn't think to tell you." "You didn't think to answer your phone either?" I asked, holding up my phone. "I called you multiple times." Her lips parted as if she were about to respond, but no words came out. She glanced down at her phone, pretending to notice the missed calls for the first time. "Oh, my battery must have died. I didn't even notice." It was a weak excuse, and we both knew it. For a long time, we stood there in silence. The weight of unspoken words hung between us like a storm ready to break. "Lily," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper, What's going on? Nothing, she said quickly. Too quickly. You're overreacting. It was just dinner. But it didn't feel like just dinner. Not anymore. Something was wrong. Something much bigger than a forgotten phone call or a change of plans. And in that moment, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wanted to believe her. Really, I did. Part of me clung to the idea that this was all just a misunderstanding. A series of innocent mistakes that happened to look bad from the outside. But then there was the other part of me, the part that had felt something shift between us months ago. The part that noticed how she'd started spending more time on her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't share with me. The part that had brushed off these little red flags because, well, we had been together for years. Lily wouldn't lie to me, would she? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. A different restaurant? I asked, crossing my arms. Which one? Her eyes flickered with hesitation for just a second, barely enough to notice. But it was there. It's this little bistro near the waterfront, she said finally. You wouldn't know it. We've never been there together. I nodded slowly, my pulse quickening. What's it called? She blinked, caught off guard. Bistro something. I can't remember the full name. The excuse was weak, flimsy, and it only deepened my suspicion. Lily wasn't the kind of person to forget details like that. She remembered every little thing. Restaurant names, wine labels, even random trivia from movies we watched together years ago. I stared at her, waiting for her to offer something more, an explanation that made sense, a scrap of information that could put my mind at ease. But she just stood there, shifting uncomfortably under my gaze. I'm tired, she said finally, brushing past me. Let's talk about this tomorrow, okay? Before I could respond, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room with 100 unanswered questions swirling in my head. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying our conversation in my mind, analyzing every word, every hesitation, every glance. Something about her story didn't add up. I checked her phone while she slept, but it was clean, too clean. No texts, no calls, no emails that could explain where she'd really been. It was as if she had erased everything before walking through the door. My heart sank. She wasn't just hiding something. She had gone out of her way to cover her tracks. The next morning, Lily acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, humming to herself like it was just another normal day. I stood at the window watching her drive away, my mind made up. I needed answers. I decided to call her closest colleague, Sarah, under the guise of casual curiosity. Sarah and Lily had worked together for years, and if anyone knew about this birthday dinner, it would be her. Hey, Sarah, I said, keeping my tone light. Hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to thank you for taking Lily out for her birthday. She had a great time. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Birthday dinner? Sarah repeated, her voice laced with confusion. Yeah, I said slowly. You know, the one last night? Another pause. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't at any dinner. Neither was anyone from the office, as far as I know. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you sure? Positive, Sarah said. We had a little celebration at the office in the afternoon, just cupcakes and coffee, but no dinner. Lily left around 5, said she had plans with you. The blood drained from my face. Thanks, Sarah, I said, my voice barely steady. I appreciate it. No problem, she said. Is everything okay? Yeah, Elite. Everything's fine. But everything was far from fine. I hung up the phone, my heart racing. The picture was becoming clearer, and it wasn't one I liked. Lily hadn't been with her colleagues. She hadn't gone to a restaurant near the waterfront. She had lied to me, plain and simple. The question was, why? Where had she really been? And with whom? For the rest of the day, I tried to focus on work, but my mind refused to cooperate. I kept going over every detail of the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. The late nights at work, the sudden interest in team-building dinners, the way she had started dressing up more often. Nothing dramatic, just small changes that I had chalked up to her wanting to feel good about herself. But now, every little change felt like a clue I had ignored. I knew I couldn't let this go. Not without answers. That night, after dinner, I casually brought up her birthday again. "So," I said, keeping my tone light, "what did you end up ordering at that bistro?" Lily glanced at me, her fork pausing midair. "Oh, I had the salmon," she said. "It was really good." "Salmon, huh?" I said, nodding. "What did the others order?" Her eyes darted toward the window for just a second. Another hesitation. "I didn't really pay attention," she said. "We were too busy talking." It was another weak response. Lily always paid attention. She had a near-photographic memory when it came to details like that. My stomach churned. I couldn't keep playing this game. "Lily," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I talked to Sarah today." Her eyes snapped back to mine. "What?" "I called her," I said. "She said there was no dinner. No one from the office went out that night." For a split second, panic flashed across her face. Then, just as quickly, she masked it with a calm smile. "Sarah must have been confused," she said. "It wasn't an official office thing. Just a few of us went out." "Where?" I pressed. Her smile faltered again. "Does it really matter?" she asked, her voice edging toward frustration. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Because you're lying to me," I said, my voice rising. "And I want to know why." The tension in the room felt suffocating. My pulse thundered in my ears, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Lily's calm facade was starting to crack, but she wasn't ready to let go of the lie just yet. "Lying to you?" she said, forcing a laugh. "John, you're being paranoid. It was just dinner with a couple of colleagues. Sarah wasn't there, that's all. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. You can keep spinning this story if you want," I said, leaning forward. "But we both know something isn't right. You didn't answer your phone. You weren't at the restaurant you told me about. And now, suddenly, no one remembers this dinner but you." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Panic, maybe, or guilt. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice softer now. "I should have told you we changed plans. I didn't think it would be such a big deal." "But it is a big deal," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Because I'm not just asking where you were. I'm asking who you were with." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, too wide to ignore. I didn't press her further that night. Not because I believed her, but because I needed time to think. Time to figure out my next move. If Lily wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. I spent the next few days watching her closely, her routines, her behavior, her phone. Every little thing that had once seemed normal now felt like a potential clue. The change was subtle at first. She'd leave her phone face down on the counter, something she never used to do. She'd take longer than usual on her errands, returning with vague excuses about traffic or long lines. And then there were the late-night texts. I never caught her sending them, but I'd see the glow of her phone screen in the dark, lighting up with notifications she ignored until she thought I wasn't looking. The final straw came one evening when I noticed a new habit, one that set off every alarm bell in my head. She started locking her phone. Lily had never been secretive about her phone before. We knew each other's passcodes. We'd swap phones to look something up or check a message without thinking twice. But now, every time her phone buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly, lock the screen, and slip it into her pocket. I waited until she was in the shower that night before making my move. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, the screen dark and silent. My heart pounded as I picked it up and entered the passcode. A code that had worked just days ago. Incorrect passcode. I tried again, slower this time, thinking I must have made a mistake. Incorrect passcode. She had changed it. My stomach dropped. When Lily came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed, her phone in my hand. "You changed your passcode," I said, holding it up. She froze for a split second, then recovered quickly. "Yeah, there was a weird login attempt on one of my apps. so I figured it was safer to change it. Strange, I said, my voice calm. You didn't tell me about that. It wasn't a big deal, she said, toweling off her hair. I didn't want to worry you. I stared at her, searching for some sign that she was telling the truth. But all I saw was the same carefully constructed mask she had been wearing for days. Give me the new passcode, I said. She blinked, caught off guard. What? The new passcode? I repeated. If it's no big deal, then you won't mind giving it to me. Her eyes flickered with panic again. John, you're being ridiculous. Why do you even want it? Because I don't trust you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Not anymore. Her expression crumbled, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. Her lips parted, her eyes filled with something like regret. But then she turned on her heels and walked out of the room. Good night, John, she said over her shoulder, her voice cold. The bedroom door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone in the dark with my thoughts. I knew then that whatever Lily was hiding, it wasn't something small. It wasn't a forgotten dinner location or a harmless night out with friends. It was something bigger, something that could tear our life apart, and I was going to find out exactly what it was. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Lily had left early without saying goodbye, something that had become more frequent lately. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything that had happened the night before. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was right in front of me, buried in all the little inconsistencies, the vague excuses, the unexplained absences. The phone. I needed to stop playing defense. If I wanted the truth, I had to go on the offensive. I started with her phone records. It wasn't difficult to access them. Our phone plan was shared, and with a few clicks, I had a full list of her recent calls and messages. My eyes scanned the screen, looking for anything unusual. Then I saw it. A number that appeared over and over again. It wasn't a number I recognized. No name attached to it. Just a long string of digits that showed up at least twice a day, sometimes more. My heart started to race. I copied the number into my phone and hit search contact. Nothing. Then I did the next logical thing. I called it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before a voice answered. Hello. It was a man's voice. Calm, confident, and just familiar enough to make my stomach turn. I didn't say anything. My mind raced, trying to connect the voice to a face, a name, something. But before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at my phone, my pulse thundering in my ears. Who was this man? And why was my wife calling him so often? I spent the rest of the day piecing together the puzzle, driven by equal parts curiosity and dread. I scrolled through her call logs, compared times and dates, and cross-referenced them with her calendar. It didn't take long to find the pattern. Every time she claimed she had a team-building dinner or last-minute work drinks, she had called this number either right before or right after. I felt like I had just uncovered the smoking gun. But what did it mean? Was it just an emotional connection? Or was it more? I needed to know. That evening, I confronted her again, this time with the phone records. Who is he? I asked, holding my phone out toward her. The number you call every day. The one you've been hiding from me. Lily's eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw real fear flash across her face. But then, just as quickly, she recovered. It's nothing, she said, her voice carefully measured. It's just a friend from work. A friend you call twice a day? I asked, my voice rising. A friend whose number doesn't even have a name in your phone? She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. Don't lie to me, Lily. Not this time. I know you've been hiding something, and I want the truth. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes darted toward the door, like she was calculating her escape. But then, something in her seemed to snap. Fine, she said, her voice trembling. You want the truth? It's not what you think. Then tell me, I said, my heart pounding. What is it? She took a deep breath, her hands shaking. He's someone I used to know. From a long time ago. What kind of used to know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated. We dated. Years before I met you. We lost touch, but we reconnected recently. It was purely platonic at first, but things got complicated. My stomach dropped. Complicated how? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. We started talking more. About old times. About the things we used to share. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but I got caught up in it. I was confused. Confused, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You lied to me. You spent your birthday with him. And you're telling me it was just confusion. I never planned for this to happen, she said, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to hurt you. I swear I didn't. But you did, I said, my voice cold. You hurt me in ways you can't even begin to understand. The room felt like it was closing in on us. I could barely breathe, my mind spinning with the weight of her confession. I had suspected for weeks that something was wrong, but hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. I need time, I said finally, stepping back, to think, to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with all of this. Lily nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. But as she turned to leave the room, a new question burned in the back of my mind. One that I couldn't ignore. Had this been a one-time mistake? Or was there more that she wasn't telling me? I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying Lily's words over and over again in my mind. We dated. It got complicated. It was like a song on repeat. The same haunting chorus I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. She told me it was emotional, that nothing physical had happened. That she had gotten caught up in the nostalgia of a long-forgotten romance. But I didn't believe her. Not fully. Not after everything else she'd hidden from me. That mysterious man, the voice on the other end of the phone, was the key to everything. I knew his number by heart now. I'd stared at it for hours, my thumb hovering over the call button more times than I cared to admit. But each time I stopped myself. What would I even say? Instead, I decided to do something I'd never imagined doing in my life. I followed her. Felt ridiculous at first, like something out of a bad detective movie. I left work early one afternoon, parked a few streets down from her office, and waited. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her walk out of the building, her phone pressed to her ear. I stayed far enough back that she wouldn't notice me, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. She crossed the street, walked 2 blocks, and stopped in front of a small coffee shop. That's when he appeared. A tall man in his early 40s, with sharp features and an easy confidence that set my teeth on edge. He smiled when he saw her, wrapping her in a quick hug before they sat down at a table by the window. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. There he was, the man she'd been calling every day, the man she spent her birthday with while I sat at home wondering what had gone wrong. And now, I was watching them laugh together like old friends with no idea that I was just a few feet away, drowning in my own rage. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, debating what to do next. Should I walk in and confront them? Demand an explanation right there in front of everyone? Or should I wait, let her finish her little rendezvous, and confront her at home when she had no excuses left to hide behind? I chose the latter. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to burst through that door. But I waited. I watched. And when she finally left the coffee shop, I followed her back to our house, my heart pounding the entire way. When she walked through the front door, she froze at the sight of me sitting in the living room. "You're home early," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "So are you," I said, leaning back in the chair. "How was your coffee?" Her face went pale. "What?" "I saw you," I said, my voice calm but cold. "At the coffee shop. With him." She didn't even bother denying it. Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, she looked like a balloon that had just been deflated. "You followed me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to," I said, standing up, "because you've been lying to me for weeks, and I needed the truth." She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Well, here we are," I said, crossing my arms. "So why don't you tell me everything?" And she did. Piece by piece, the story came tumbling out. His name was Mark. They had dated briefly in her late 20s before losing touch. He'd reached out on social media a year ago, and at first it was just innocent catching up. Then the messages got longer, more frequent, more personal. She told me it wasn't physical, that they had only met in person a handful of times, that she didn't know how to end it once it started spiraling out of control. I was lonely, she said, tears streaming down her face. I got caught up in the past, and I didn't realize how far it had gone until it was too late. I listened, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. You could have talked to me, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You could have told me how you were feeling, but instead you chose to lie, to hide this from me. I know, she said, sobbing now, and I hate myself for it. I was selfish and I was wrong, but I never stopped loving you. I just lost myself for a while. I stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a heavy stone. I need some air, I said, turning toward the door. John, wait. But I didn't wait. I walked out of the house, the cool evening air hitting me like a slap in the face. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the dashboard, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the idea that this was just an emotional mistake, a detour she'd taken but was ready to come back from. But the other part of me couldn't shake the image of her with Mark, laughing over coffee like nothing in the world could touch them. I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. The only question now was, what do I do next? I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly around the city, trying to make sense of everything Lily had told me. Her words kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't physical. I got caught up in the past. But how could I believe that? I had watched them together. The way they leaned in close, the way she smiled at him in a way I hadn't seen in years. Those weren't the actions of someone who was just confused. It felt like my entire world was crumbling beneath me, and the worst part was, I had no idea how deep the cracks really went. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. If Lily wasn't willing to tell me the full truth, then I'd get it from Mark himself. I still had his number saved from when I called him the first time. My thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before I pressed it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello, Mark, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. It's John. We need to talk. There was a long pause on the other end. I don't think that's a good idea, he said finally. Well, too bad, I snapped. I'm not asking. We're going to meet, and you're going to tell me exactly what's been going on between you and my wife. Another pause. Then, fine. Where? I told him to meet me at a park not far from where he lived. It was a public place, neutral ground. I didn't trust myself to meet him anywhere private. When I arrived at the park, Mark was already waiting for me. Leaning casually against a bench like this was just another ordinary day. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something smug in that smile that made my blood boil. John, he said, extending a hand. Nice to finally meet you in person. I ignored his hand. Cut the pleasantries. I'm not here to make friends. I want answers. He raised an eyebrow. Answers about what? You know damn well what, I said, stepping closer. Lily, how long has this been going on? And don't bother lying to me. I've already caught her in enough of those. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. You're a bold man, John. I'll give you that. Just tell me the truth, I said through gritted teeth. For a moment he studied me, as if weighing his options. Then finally he nodded. Fine, he said. The truth? We've been talking for a year. First it was just catching up. But yeah, it got complicated. Lily and I have history. There are feelings there that never really went away. Feelings, I repeated, my fists clenching. You think that justifies sneaking around behind my back? I'm not here to justify anything, Mark said, his tone calm and collected. But you should know that it was never about hurting you. Lily was lost. She needed someone who understood her, someone who could remind her of who she used to be. I took a step closer, my heart hammering in my chest. And you thought you were that person? She thought so, he said with a smirk. I don't remember deciding to hit him. One moment, I was standing there, seething with rage, and the next, my fist connected with his jaw. Mark stumbled back, clutching his face. Jesus, John, he shouted, holding up his hands. Calm down. Stay the hell away from my wife, I said, my voice trembling with fury. If I ever see you near her again, you'll regret it. He nodded quickly, backing away. Got it. Message received. I stood there, watching him retreat, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I should have felt satisfied, but all I felt was emptiness. When I got home, Lily was waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Where were you? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Talking to Mark, I said, my tone cold. Her eyes widened. What? Why would you? Because I needed the truth, I said, cutting her off. And I got it. He told me everything. Tears welled up in her eyes. John, please, I made a mistake. I know that, but it didn't mean anything. I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? You've been talking to him for a year, Lily. You spent your birthday with him. How can you stand there and tell me it didn't mean anything? I was lost, she said, sobbing now. I felt invisible, like I was fading away. And Mark, he made me feel seen again. But it was a mistake. I know that now. I want us to work through this. I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. I don't know if we can, I said finally. Too much has happened. Too many lies. The rest of the night passed in silence. I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. I had always thought love was enough, that no matter what life threw at us, we could get through it together. But now I wasn't so sure. The house felt like a tomb the next morning, silent, cold, and filled with the echoes of everything unsaid. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, sleep-deprived and hollow. Every fiber of my being ached from the weight of what had happened, from the endless loop of thoughts that kept playing in my head. I kept asking myself the same question. Is there a way back from this? The logical part of me said no. Trust was the foundation of any relationship, and once it was broken, how could you ever rebuild it? But the emotional part of me, the part that had loved Lily for years, wasn't so ready to give up. Later that day, Lily knocked softly on the door. I didn't answer at first, but she opened it anyway, stepping into the room with tear-streaked cheeks. I made coffee, she said, holding out a cup like it was some kind of peace offering. I sat up, taking the cup without a word. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her eyes searching mine. John, I know I've said this 100 times, but I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I hate what I've done to us. I hate the person I became. But I want to fix this. I want to fight for us. I took a sip of coffee, the warmth doing little to thaw the cold knot in my stomach. How do you expect me to believe you? I asked quietly. After everything you've done, how can I ever trust you again? I'll do whatever it takes, she said. Counseling, therapy. I'll give you full access to my phone, my emails, everything. Just, please don't give up on us. I stared at her, my mind torn in two. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take that leap and hope we could find a way back. But the other part of me, the part that had watched her with Mark and felt the sting of betrayal, wasn't so sure. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to figure out what I want. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. For the next few days, we lived in a strange limbo. We barely spoke, navigating around each other like ghosts. I spent my evenings walking around the neighborhood, trying to clear my head, but no matter how far I walked, the same questions followed me. Could I forgive her? Did I even want to? One night, as I sat on the porch, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown number. We need to talk. There's something you don't know about Lily and Mark. My pulse quickened. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Me? Who is this? The reply came almost immediately. Unknown number. Someone who thought you deserved the truth. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the coffee shop on Elm Street. The next day, I sat in the coffee shop, my heart pounding as I waited for this mysterious informant to appear. I had no idea what to expect. A colleague of Lily's? An old friend? Maybe even someone connected to Mark. I didn't have to wait long. A woman in her early 30s walked in, scanning the room before locking eyes with me. She made her way over, sitting down across from me without introducing herself. "You're John, right?" she said, her voice low. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name's Rachel," she said. "I'm Mark's ex, and trust me when I say you don't know the full story." My stomach twisted into knots. "What are you talking about?" She leaned in, her eyes serious. "Mark and Lily have been seeing each other for longer than she told you. A lot longer. This didn't start a year ago. It's been going on for almost 3 years. 3 years," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Rachel nodded. "He told me everything. First, I didn't believe him, but then I found the messages, the emails. He always had a way of pulling people in, making them believe whatever he wanted them to believe." My hands tightened into fists. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I was in your position once," she said. "I know what it's like to be fed half-truths and lies. I figured you deserved the full picture." I sat back, my mind spinning. 3 years. Not a brief emotional connection, not a one-time mistake. This had been a long, drawn-out betrayal. "Thank you," I said finally, my voice barely steady. Rachel nodded, standing up. "Good luck, John. You're going to need it." I drove home in a daze, my thoughts racing faster than I could keep up. When I walked through the front door, Lily was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said, smiling weakly. "You're home early." I dropped my keys on the counter, my eyes locked on her. "We need to talk." Her smile faded. "What's wrong?" "I just met someone interesting," I said, my voice calm but deadly. "Rachel, Mark's ex." Lily froze, the color draining from her face. "John, I can explain." "Don't bother," I said, cutting her off. She already did. 3 years, Lily. 3 years. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't want to tell me," I said, my voice rising. "You lied to me over and over again. You looked me in the eyes and told me it was just a year, that it wasn't serious. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now?" "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of losing you. Scared of what would happen if you found out the whole truth." "Well, congratulations," I said bitterly. "You've succeeded. You've lost me anyway." I stood there in the kitchen, my heart pounding as I waited for Lily's response. Tears streamed down her face, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "John, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was trying to protect us. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to fix it." Her words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. "Protect us," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You weren't protecting us. You were protecting yourself. You had 3 years to end it, to tell me the truth, and you chose not to. You didn't care about us. You cared about not getting caught." She shook her head, her sobs coming harder now. "That's not true. I loved you the whole time. I still love you. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. "A mistake is something you regret and never do again. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again." I could see the panic rising in her eyes, the realization that there was no way out this time. No half-truths, no carefully crafted lies to save her. "You've destroyed everything," I said, my voice trembling. "Our life, our marriage. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built together." "Please," she said, stepping closer. "We can still fix this. We can go to counseling, start over, rebuild the trust. We can get through this if we try." But I was already shaking my head. "I've been trying, Lily. I've been trying for months to believe you, to trust you, to give you the benefit of the doubt. And every time, you've given me another reason not to. I took a deep breath, the finality of my next words settling heavily on my chest. I'm done. For a moment, it felt like the world stopped. Lily stared at me, her face crumpling as the weight of my words sank in. No, she whispered. Please, John, don't say that. Don't give up on us. It's already over, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You ended it the moment you chose him over me. Over and over again. She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her for a moment, my heart breaking in ways I didn't think were possible. But I didn't move. Couldn't. There was nothing left to say. That night, I packed a bag and checked into a hotel. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I just sat there, staring at the blank wall, trying to process what had just happened. For 20 years, Lily had been my everything. My partner, my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. And now, in the span of a few days, it was all gone. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I want to start the process, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I want a divorce. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like they belonged to someone else. But as soon as I said them, a strange sense of relief washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking back control of my life. Over the next few weeks, everything moved in slow motion. I went back to the house a few times to pack up my things, careful to avoid Lily. Each time, the house felt less like home and more like a museum of our past. A place filled with memories that no longer felt real. Emily, our daughter, came home for a weekend after hearing about what happened. She hugged me tightly, her eyes filled with concern. I'm so sorry, Dad, she said softly. I can't believe this is happening. I nodded, unable to find the words. I didn't want to burden her with the details, didn't want to drag her into the mess Lily and I had created. All that matters is that we're going to be okay, I said, forcing a smile. Both of us. Lily tried to reach out a few times. Texts, voicemails, long, emotional emails begging for a second chance. But I didn't respond. I had spent too long chasing after the truth. Too long giving her opportunities she didn't deserve. This time, I chose myself. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. It wasn't dramatic or messy. We both knew there was no point in dragging things out. We split our assets evenly, agreed to sell the house, and went our separate ways. There were no screaming matches, no bitter custody battles over memories or furniture. Just a quiet, mutual acknowledgement that the life we had built was over. Still, it wasn't easy. Every signature, every document I signed felt like a final nail in the coffin of the life I thought I'd have forever. Lily cried in the courtroom the day the divorce was finalized. I didn't. I had run out of tears long before that. We shared one last look before we went our separate ways. No words, no dramatic goodbyes, just a silent understanding that whatever we had once been, it was gone. And just like that, 20 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. The first few months after the divorce were the hardest. I felt like a stranger in my own life, waking up in an unfamiliar apartment, eating dinner alone at a small kitchen table, scrolling through my phone with no one to share my day with. But slowly, things began to change. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. I started going to the gym again, took long walks around the city, and spent hours at bookstores, rediscovering the things I used to love before life got complicated. It wasn't a grand transformation. There was no sudden epiphany, no lightning bolt moment where everything magically fell into place. It was gradual, like piecing together a puzzle one tiny piece at a time. Emily became my anchor during those months. She called me every day, sometimes just to check in, sometimes just to share a funny story from her day. You're stronger than you think, Dad, she said one evening, her voice warm and reassuring. You'll get through this. I didn't know it at the time, but she was right. One night, about a year after the divorce, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt content. Not happy exactly, not yet, but at peace. I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the nights spent wondering how it had all gone so wrong. But I also thought about everything that had come after. The strength I had found in myself. The freedom to rediscover who I was without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. The realization that life didn't end just because one chapter did. It was messy. It was painful. But it was also mine. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend at a coffee shop. We hadn't seen each other in years, and after a bit of catching up, she asked me out for dinner. For a second, I hesitated. The idea of starting over, of opening myself up to someone new, felt terrifying. But then I thought about everything I'd been through, the mountains I had climbed just to get to this moment. Yeah, I said, smiling. I'd like that. It wasn't a love at first sight kind of thing. We took it slow, really slow. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Not because I needed someone else to fix me. Not because I needed validation or closure. But because I realized that I was ready to move forward. One step at a time. The end.